Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott. On this podcast, I talk a lot about love, life, healing, spirituality, witchcraft, magic, tarot, mediumship, feminine energy, and everything in between. And it's been really fun doing this podcast for y'all over the course of the year. This started in February. I can't believe it's already so close to the end of the year, and this podcast is still going strong. So thank you so much to everyone who has been listening, who has been subscribing, who has been sharing and spreading the word and leaving reviews. Honestly, it means the world to me. So thank you so much to everybody for hanging out and allowing me to voice all of the random things that are in my head. I appreciate y'all. So today I'm going to talk about an interesting concept that I learned from Black women on the internet. That is the main place I've heard this word used, and I find it hilarious and so useful and just true. And so now I'm going to share it with all of you because I think everyone needs to know about this hilarious concept. So it is the word pickmeisha. Pickmeisha. So I've also heard this in its more simple form called a pick me. And this is a term that is often used to describe a certain type of woman. And so it's really, really, really interesting to me, this whole concept. So let me explain it to you in the way that I understand it. So a lot of us women have been pick-me's at one point, and hopefully it is something that most of us grow out of, though I don't actually think a lot of women grow out of it, which is unfortunate. But that is why I think it's important to talk about this phrase and this word and what it means. I don't think it benefits women to be a pick-me or a pick-meisha. So what is it? Let me explain. So a pick-me is a woman who will do kind of anything for the attention and approval of men. And this often includes putting down or insulting other women. And so this can look a lot of different ways, but this is often women who make excuses for men's bad behavior, or women who just, insult the women who have high standards and want to be treated better by men. A pick-me is someone who is going to be bending over backwards to be doing everything to please a man, often to the point where she is abandoning her own self and sometimes even abandoning her own personality, abandoning her own boundaries, maybe even giving up things that she used to like or things that she liked to do in order to be agreeable, in order to be acceptable and approved of by men in general, or whatever man is around that she wants the attention of. So it's pretty interesting, and I've seen this used a lot in there's certain communities that exist online to basically expose the bad behavior of some men, and is often pretty extreme, abusive, very unkind behavior from men towards women. And so unfortunately, some women have decided to screen cap that stuff and then send it to the men who are being written about. And that is a really good example of pick-me behavior, right? Where women think that, this other woman who's complaining about this guy must just be a crazy bitch or whatever, and so she's gonna be approved of by being a cool girl and showing the thing to the guy. And so we can get into a whole conversation about those groups. That's definitely a whole other podcast episode about the pros and cons and the ethics and the importance of whisper networks among women, and how it's so prevalent to experience abuse for a lot of women, at least once in their life, and the normalization of silence, the suing in order to shut up of women who have survived abuse and sexual violence. There's a whole slew of things that we can get into about that I'm going to leave for another episode because it's a little bit too dark and sad for today's topic. So it's a little bit traumatic to get into all that, so I'm not going to. But hopefully you guys get a bit of an idea of what I mean, right? It's the type of woman who prides herself in being low maintenance, who prides herself in being one of the guys, who prides herself in not being like other women, blah, 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 blah. And all of this, often these women end up getting the short end of the stick anyway, right? So it's like they often do get picked, quote unquote, because they're being so how I've described. And yet, the prize that they get kind of sucks anyway. So it's kind of interesting, right? It's like being a pick-me is like not good for women, but a lot of women are this way. Because I think a lot of straight women anyway, and like that kind of goes without saying in the way that I'm talking about this, hopefully y'all know. But I think even bisexual women have dealt with this, right? Like any woman who dates men is like someone who's probably experienced something like what I'm talking about. This idea that like the biggest prize is to get a man or whatever. Like I think a lot of women feel that way. And I think that's part of why we see this pressure on young women to get married or to get into a relationship or to stay in a relationship, even if it is unhappy or, actually veers on the edge of being like, let's say, abusive. That's obviously something that we all want to get out of, something like that. And yet we are in a culture where, a lot of people are very skeptical of single women. It's like, oh, what's wrong with you? Why are you not, whatever. And a lot of women, unfortunately, are very insecure about themselves, about their worth, about their bodies. And being with a man is seen as, the highest approval. It's a big win for a lot of women. They feel good, they feel worthy, they feel beautiful. And I'll give an example of when I learned that this was the case. Like when I learned that most women are very insecure. It's going to sound crazy that I did not know this until so late in my life. But I remember going to a conference back in, I think it was 2019, summer 2019, I'm pretty sure. And it was the Survivor Wealth Symposium thing. And I actually had an amazing time. Like, I loved it. I found it so transformative. Like, I came home and I finished writing a book that is still not out, but it was a very transformative, very positive experience. Like, I really have nothing bad to say about the conference. And, like, if it happens again, I'll be there in a heartbeat. But what I found very interesting about it was that so much of it, like since it was so geared towards women and AFAB folks and queer folks in general, but mostly women, right? Like that is generally who is experiencing sexualized gender-based violence is mostly women. Like so much of it was, getting people to feel confident, like getting people to feel worthy. Like it started from this place of assumption of like, oh, you put everyone else's needs before your own. And so it was a multi-day event, and so much of the event was not actually focused on business and like business strategy and business skill building. Like almost all of it was kind of based on this idea of worthiness and increasing women's sense of self-worth and self-confidence. And let me tell you, like I've been in business-oriented spaces that are designed by and for men, and I've been there, and let me tell you, it is a very drastically different experience. No business thing that I've been to that was organized by men ever talked about self-worth, ever talked about, oh, you put everyone else's needs above your own. You don't think you're that great. You got to build your confidence. You can do this. You got to start believing in yourself. Like literally, I've never heard that in any like otherwise type of business-based entrepreneurship environment. It's not been my experience ever. And so when I contrast these two things right next to each other, I was like, oh shit. A lot of women must really need this. This must be a really big problem for a lot of women that a lot of women don't believe in ourselves. A lot of women, we're starting from we're not starting from 0, we're starting from minus 100. Because a lot of women's self-worth, our worthiness, our confidence has been beat down to the point of being below the ground. It's in hell. A lot of women's confidence is in hell, right? It's so beneath the ground. And so this was such an interesting experience to me. I did find it so valuable. And again, this is not me shit talking the experience. I had a great time. But I learned from that, wow, I didn't realize that this was such an issue among women. Somehow I didn't know this at 28 or 29 or however old I was when I went to that, which is, I guess, a shocking thing, but I truly didn't know. And now that I do so much work with women, most of my clients are women, and most of my clients are AFAB folks, at least, even if queer or non-binary or gender questioning, I almost exclusively work with AFAB folks. And for anyone who doesn't know that phrase, it means assigned feminine at birth. So that would be sex is assigned as female, so people with ovaries and vaginas and all of that from birth, if anyone is new to some of that terminology. And so I think it's, to bring it back to the topic of the podcast today, this idea of the pick me, I think that's where this kind of takes root, right? It's that so many women, they don't realize that their confidence is so underground. They don't realize that they're so thirsty and so hungry for the approval and attention, specifically of men. They don't realize it. And so then when they behave in these certain ways that are kind of anti-woman, when they're easy to please, when they have no standards, when they'll do anything to keep and get a man, it's just not good for anybody, and it kicks a lot of other women in the face when some certain women behave this way due to their own insecurities. And so, yes, being a pick-me is a bit of an insult. If anyone calls you that, you're being insulted. If I ever call anyone that, I am insulting them. But I kind of get it, right? I have been that person, even though I had very high confidence for most of my life, obviously not the entire time. I think we all struggle with this up and down, right? But even when I was confident in myself, even when I did think that I had self-love, there was still a time, in my early 20s, when I absolutely kind of contorted myself into a pretzel in order to get that approval. And I think most women have kind of been there at some point, right? To varying degrees. And so it's interesting though, right? Because the pick-me behavior, it does tend to be so negative towards other women and so negative towards women with higher standards who expect and want and inspire more out of the men in their lives. And so it's this very interesting behavior. And I think that we're in a very fascinating moment in the culture wars, especially in North America. I know a lot of the American cultural conversations have seeped into Canada and the UK, and I'm sure other places too, where a lot of people are very confused about gender right now. A lot of people are very confused about gender roles right now. A lot of people don't know where they stand, either personally or in their relationships, or, who's supposed to ask who out or who's supposed to take what role. And I'm a big proponent that people are grown adults and can kind of choose to do what they want. But what I also know is that a lot of women who take on this kind of masculine persona of this pick-me male pleaser at all costs to themselves, they bleed themselves dry in order to please and get approval of a guy. A lot of those women at the end of the day are dried up, shriveled up, miserable, not very happy, and just have no energy left for themselves. And I think that's a very tragic thing. And so I do believe that anyone who is listening to this and is like, oh my God, that has been me or that is me or whatever, what I want to say is it's possible to escape that. It is possible to learn how to not be a pick-me and how to, instead of wishing that some guy would pick you, instead of that, you can start by picking yourself and choosing to value yourself above all else, your standards, your boundaries, your self-love. right? It is absolutely a possible thing. And so that is what I wanted to talk about today with this episode, this concept of the pick me. So I want to give some examples of pick me behavior in case anyone's confused. And since this is a pretty, intense, multifaceted, diverse topic, I'm sure there will be more episodes where I discuss this at least a little bit. But being a pick me is not the same thing as wanting to be in a relationship, right? So I just want to get that out there first and foremost in terms of the, list of qualities. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in a relationship or longing for commitment or romance or anything like that, right? That alone does not make a pick me. But what does make a pick me, as I said earlier in this episode, a big part of it is a woman who is going to be putting down other women, specifically when men are watching or present or anything like that, right? And so obviously not all women like each other. Like I like to consider myself a girl's girl, but at the same time, there's a lot of women that I think I don't agree with, or I just don't like them or whatever. Like, just because you're a woman does not mean you have to love every other woman ever. Like, so it's okay to disagree with your fellow women. That alone does not make you a pick-me. But what does make someone a pick-me, or what I would describe as a pick-me quality, would be someone, again, who is putting down other women, when it comes to performing, let's say for men, and like this putting down other women is often a performance for the male gaze. Putting down, let's say that other women really love shopping and you are someone who really loves sports or whatever. Whether or not that's genuine is maybe up for debate. Personally, I love both sports and shopping. But someone who is a pick-me might be like, oh yeah, those other girls with their shopping and wine, fuck that. They're so lame. I'm one of the boys. You can bring me to your sports games and we can go eat pizza and drink beer, and I'm not like the other girls. And whether or not we genuinely love pizza or beer is kind of beside the point. What is the point is, notice how this imaginary example, which I think is actually quite common, there is this comparison of the pick-me self as, positive against other women, whether they exist or are abstract, as the negative. So the pick-me woman positions herself as a superior choice, often because she's so low maintenance, or because she's already interested in things that, let's say, typical men might be interested in, like sports, video games, pubs and grimy bars, rather than like a sleek, upscale, clean, quiet environment tends to be something that maybe more women would prefer, generally speaking. And so this is a big component of pick-me behavior, right? Another component of pick-me behavior is having very low standards. So a lot of pick-me women are happy to go 50-50 with a man and will brag about going 50-50, will cook for a man, clean for a man, even if they had a 12-hour nursing shift and they're super exhausted, and maybe their man only worked 9 to 5, and yet the woman is still slaving away in order to please him, right? So a big part of this is all about performance, specifically to keep the interest or perceived interest or loyalty of a man. right? And so obviously a lot of this is very hetero based. And so my queer listeners, and obviously I'm queer as well, but I think regardless of what your gender is or your sexual orientation or whatever, I think there's still a lot to learn from this concept, right? Even though I'm talking about it in a pretty heteronormative type of way, I think it is a useful thing for like everyone to kind of think about. And I'm sure even if you are lesbian or gay or have relationships that are not heterosexual, I think you'll probably be able to still notice maybe some of these behaviors, even if it doesn't show up in exactly the same way as it does in the typical heterosexual dating context, right? So I just want to throw that out there. And so anyway, what was I saying? So about having very low standards. So I already mentioned a bit of how a pick-me woman will tend to completely demolish herself for the benefit of the man, right? So that can be overgiving, whether through cooking, cleaning, paying her way, all of this stuff, getting him crazy gifts, even when he doesn't get her anything. This very overgiving, overperforming. And so one of the things to pay attention to with this pick-me energy is, if I'm going to talk about it in terms of feminine and masculine energy, it's a very masculine energy to be in, right? It's trying to earn love by doing as opposed to by being. And I think that's really important, right? Because with feminine energy, as I've talked about before in this podcast, it's all about the quality and the energy of who we are being, rather than what we are doing. So a big part of why I'm so interested in teaching women feminine energy is because I would love to see so many more women step into their inherent sense of self-confidence and self-worth, to know that they don't have to do anything in order to be worthy of love, especially when it comes to heterosexual dynamics, right? And so the other thing with this is that pick-me women often will ignore or betray their own boundaries or compromise on their own boundaries for the sake of keeping a man. So one example could be adult material. I don't want to get censored or anything, so I'm going to be putting this on YouTube. But let's say like adult images and videos. Let's just... Ooh, and it's like raining so hard now. I don't know if you guys can hear that in the background. But let's just use the example of like adult materials. So personally, that's a deal breaker for me. I don't want to be dating anyone who is engaging in strip clubs or adult videos or photos or engaging with any of that type of stuff. It's just not my thing, right? And so let's just take this example and work with it, right? So if someone is a pick-me, they would, let's say, start with this boundary, but then if their guy who they're dating, eventually they find out that he's like, subscribed to a bunch of things, goes to the strip club every week with the boys, watches adult videos every morning before he goes to work. A person who has healthy boundaries and self-worth, and who actually does believe in that as a boundary for themselves, is going to be like, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I communicated where I'm at, and clearly we're not compatible, so I need to end this connection. Personally, that's what I would say. That's what I have said. But someone who is a pick-me, by the way, I would do that because I believe in the abundance of the universe. I believe there's men who are out there who are going to be feeling a really similar way to me about all this kind of stuff. And so I believe that. I've found that in the past. It's not a big deal. It's fine. I believe in the abundance of that, and I believe I'm worthy of having that boundary respected. And there's probably a lot of men out there who I wouldn't even need to, express that as a boundary with, because they would already feel that way about it themselves, right? But if we're going to use this example of a pick-me woman, what she would probably do was she'd be like, oh, you know what? Maybe it's not that big of a deal anyway. Or, you know what? Maybe we can watch it together. Or, maybe I'll go to a strip club with you. Or, hey, here's some extra $50 to bring with you to the club. Have fun. And if that's genuinely how someone feels, Okay, fine, that's one thing. But the key point I want to be making here is that in this example, this woman would be going against her original boundaries, her original comfort zone, her original beliefs, and all of that in the interest of keeping herself in a relationship with this person, right? With this man in this fake example. But I've seen this so many times. Right. And so what we see in this example is someone who is betraying her boundaries and even changing her limitations and her comfort. She's making herself uncomfortable and betraying her own boundaries in order to keep this man. Right. And so we see that a lot with women. Is like pick-me women have this like kind of moving target in terms of what their boundaries are. And in reality, yeah, sometimes our boundaries can change, and sometimes that can be genuine and heartfelt, and that can feel like a really authentic thing to do. Maybe we get more information, maybe we change a bit as we get older, maybe whatever. We can change our mind, we can change our boundaries. That's okay. I have boundaries now that I didn't used to have in the past, and vice versa. Like, I've changed over time. That's okay. That's normal. That doesn't make anyone a this or that. It's just evolution. That's cool. But what makes someone a pick-me is also this, it's not change. Change isn't the point. The point is, why is the change happening? And in this example, the change is happening to keep the man, because keeping the man is seen to be more important and more valuable than someone being true to their own values and their own comfort level. Right? And we see, obviously, like the really dark and horrible side of something like this when you see couples who engage in like sexual violence and crime. And I watch way too much true crime, so maybe I've seen this way too much. But one typical example would be like the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka case. And I'm not going to get into that because it's too dark. We don't want to make a true crime podcast. Not what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But it's dark. And so we see there's a lot of cases. I've seen a ton of documentaries with true crime where it doesn't always work this way, obviously. Sometimes the woman is the mastermind, though I would say very, very rarely. But oftentimes you do see some women become kind of participants in crimes against other women in order to keep their man happy. One more pop culture example of this would be, God, what's that guy's name? Like Ghislaine Maxwell and that one guy, what was his name? Oh my God. You guys know who I'm talking about. Oh my God, I don't know why I'm just drawing a blank. But you guys know who I'm talking about. That like really rich dude who died in prison mysteriously. I don't know why I am forgetting his name right now. But that woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, who I think was put on trial and is in trouble still, thank God, she was responsible for like obtaining all of these young girls for him to abuse. And him and her were in a relationship, a romantic relationship. And so she is a really dark example and a criminal, abusive example of the implications on a larger level, on a darker level, about what can happen when someone is a pick-me. Jeffrey Epstein, that's who it is. So if you look at their connection, all she wanted to do was to please him at any cost, even if it meant enabling his abuse of teenage girls, right? And so that is a perfect example of pick-me behavior and why it is so horrible and toxic. And it's not good for you, and it's not good for other women either, right? It's just like a bad thing all around. Obviously, abuse is its own horrible topic on its own, and we can talk about that in another episode. But I wanted to use this very famous example just to show like where how far does this pick me behavior go? How far does betraying your own boundaries and values go in order to keep close to and get the approval from a man? And unfortunately, what we often see is that does sometimes involve throwing other women under the bus, and it's really horrible. So these are just some examples. It's already a really long episode, so I'm going to cut it off here, but I'll probably do another episode, talk about this a little bit more. I just did an Instagram poll about this, and this was the topic that you guys were the most interested in, because I'm doing a bunch of episodes this month about feminine energy and dating dynamics, and dynamics specifically between men and women, and how women can step more into their sense of self-worth and make their standards a lot higher. And so I just have a lot to say about this topic, and so this is just a little bit of an introduction to that for this month. So I'm really excited to keep making episodes about this. If you guys have any questions, if you have any requests about stuff like this, whether it's feminine energy, masculine energy, dating, energy swirling around, dynamics, questions, commentary on anything around pop culture, or especially when it comes to dating, I'm happy to get into it. And by pop culture, I don't mean like TV shows. I mean like popular culture in terms of like behavior. Like ghosting is a pop culture societal thing right now, and I did an episode about that a little while ago. Different dating dynamics, and again, dynamics between the masculine and the feminine energy. So again, more on this later. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. And I'm curious, have you been a pick-me in the past? Maybe let me know in the comments if you're listening to this on YouTube, or send me a DM on Instagram, Sabrina Scott, let me know. So I think a lot of women have been through a pick-me phase. I know I probably was when I was in my late teens and early 20s. You know, I think a lot of women go through this where we just want to feel loved. And, you know, sometimes, especially when we're a young teenager, we might feel ugly. We might feel gangly. Like, I think pretty much every teenager feels ugly, especially teenage girls. You just feel kind of awkward no matter how beautiful you are. I think all teenage girls kind of feel that way. And so there is a lot there where you're just grappling with belonging and fitting in and being accepted. And so I think a lot of women, a lot of young women, a lot of girls do fall into that. And then I think a big part of growing up and becoming a woman instead of a girl is growing out of and moving past this pick-me moment into a place where we can land confidently in our self-worth and feel confident enough in ourselves. And oh, the cute cat is just shaking her head and the little bell is ringing. I don't know if you guys heard that. But I think a part of becoming a woman as opposed to a girl, again, is just growing out of this pick-me behavior and becoming confident enough in our own self, our own worth, our own boundaries, and also in the abundance of the universe to the extent where we are okay with saying no to people and saying no to men and moving on without a second thought. I think that's incredibly important, and that's something I really want to encourage, especially young women today, to think about, you know, and hopefully put into practice. But anyway, that's it for now. It's it for this episode. If you're in Toronto, I hope you're enjoying the fucking awesome thunderstorm that is happening right now. It is gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. Such good vibes. Love it, love it. Anyway, I wanted to plug that my Feminine Energy Without Bullshit course is launching properly on November 13th. That is a week today. Monday, the new moon, and it will be open for enrollment, I believe, until the 22nd of November. And then after that, I'm doing a Black Friday sale. I've never done this before in the way that I'm going to do it. So all of my self-study stuff, except for any of my Without Bullshit courses. So this does not include Feminine Energy Without Bullshit, Magic Without Bullshit, or Tarot Without Bullshit. Those courses are like so huge and juicy that I cannot discount those. But my self-study workshops, masterclasses, except for my two most recent ones, Ancestor Magic and Tarot for Mediumship, those are still going to be full price. But everything else, including Magic for the Magic of Business, which is usually more than $2,000, that's going to be on sale, as well as all of my 3-hour master classes that I've taught over the last little while. One of them is on plastic surgery and witchcraft. I've got another affirmation series, which is usually I think $97. I have got a energy workshop, kind of helping you visualize shifting energy and actually doing it, walking you through it. So everything, again, except for those things that I mentioned, is going to be available at 50% off, which is fucking crazy. I've never done this before, but I'm thinking that, I don't know, I just want to do something crazy, and I just thought it'd be kind of fun. So put that in your calendar if there is anything of mine that you've been thinking of jumping into that does fit into any of those categories. And this is also going to include Tarot Boss, which is my masterclass around professional tarot reading and what to think about if you are expanding into that form of practice. I'm excited. So more on that soon. Just mark your calendar for both of those things, because it's just, I don't know, I'm excited. Anyway, if you have not picked up my books yet, you can do so on Amazon, no matter what country you live in. So just Google me on Amazon. And of course, my website is Sabrina M. Scott. My Instagram, Sabrina M. Scott. YouTube is youtube.com/Sabrina Scott. And I am going live for the Tarot of the Week on Tuesday, aka tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So I hope to see you guys there live. You have to subscribe if you want to comment live. So go do that now, because, it's always really fun to just vibe out with folks and pull the cards for the week. So I'm really curious what they're gonna be, and I hope to see you guys there. Talk to you guys soon. Much love. Bye.